In 1939, as the world slid inevitably into the abyss of the Second World War, the battlefield belonged to bolt-action rifles. It was their world, their era. The German infantrymen clutched the reliable and accurate Mauser 98K, the pinnacle of German weapon design. The British Tommy trusted his rapid-firing Lee Enfield with its large 10-round magazine. The Soviet soldier knew his 3-line rifle, the Mosin Nagant, like the back of his hand, valuing its incredible simplicity and ruggedness. The Italians, the Japanese, the French, all were armed with variations on the same theme. These were weapons born in the trenches of the First World War. They were reliable, powerful, and capable of hitting a target from hundreds of meters away, but they demanded the same ritual from a soldier after every shot. Remove the finger from the trigger, turn the bolt handle, pull it back to eject the spent casing, chamber a new round from the magazine, close the bolt, and aim again. This process took precious seconds. In a duel between two riflemen, it was a fair fight. In an attack or defense, it was the familiar, established rhythm of combat. The general staffs of every army in the world were convinced that this order of things was unshakable. Semi-automatic rifles, capable of firing as fast as a soldier could pull the trigger, had existed since the late 19th century, but the military establishment treated them with deep distrust. They were complex, expensive, temperamental, and, most importantly in the eyes of the generals, they encouraged soldiers to senselessly waste ammunition. Why would a common infantryman need such a high rate of fire? His job was to aim carefully and make a single precise shot. For suppressive fire, there were machine guns. This doctrine reigned supreme. In the Soviet Union, talented designers like Fedorov and Tokarev created excellent models of semi-automatic weapons, but their rifles, such as the SVT-40, never became truly widespread, giving way to the proven 3-line rifle and submachine guns. In Germany, despite all its technological genius, the Wehrmacht entered the war with a classic bolt-action rifle. Only later, faced with the realities of combat, would the Germans hastily begin developing their own semi-automatic rifles, the Gewehr 41 and 43. The world was convinced that an infantryman's war was one of single, well-aimed shots. No one could have imagined that one country would dare to go against the grain and arm every single one of its soldiers with a complex and expensive semi-automatic weapon. No one suspected that across the ocean, in the quiet of the Springfield Armory, a stubborn engineer had been working for nearly 20 years on a rifle destined to break all the rules and change the rhythm of infantry combat forever. And when this rifle reached the battlefields, adversaries, accustomed to the world of bolt actions, would believe in horror that they were fighting an army where every soldier carried a light machine gun. His name was Jean Cantius Garand, but America knew him as John Garand. He was a quiet, modest, Canadian-born engineer working at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, and he had a dream to which he dedicated nearly 20 years of his life. He wanted to create the perfect semi-automatic rifle for the U.S. Army, a weapon that would give the common infantryman firepower previously unseen on the battlefield. The work began back in 1919. While most military theorists clung to their bolt-action rifles, Garand and a small group of enthusiasts in the U.S. Ordnance Department were looking to the future. They understood that future wars would be wars of maneuver and speed, and an infantryman who could fire 8 shots while the enemy fired 1 would have an undeniable advantage. The path to his dream was long and arduous. Garand tried dozens of designs. He experimented with different operating systems, calibers, and magazines. His first prototypes, like many other semi-automatic rifles of the time, were complex, unreliable, and constantly malfunctioned. Conservative generals from the Ordnance Department viewed his work with skepticism. Why spend enormous sums of money on a questionable innovation when the Army already had the excellent and reliable Springfield M1903 rifle? The breakthrough came when Garand settled on a gas-operated system. Propellant gases, diverted from the barrel through a small port, pushed a piston. This piston, in turn, drove the entire reloading mechanism, unlocking and cycling the bolt, ejecting the spent casing, cocking the hammer, and chambering a new round. All of this happened in a fraction of a second. The soldier only had to pull the trigger again. Another ingenious yet controversial solution was the feeding system. The military demanded that the magazine not protrude from the stock, fearing it would hinder the soldier and be easily damaged. Garand devised a unique system. 8 rounds, held in a metal end-block clip, were inserted into the open action from the top in a single motion. This allowed the rifle to be reloaded very quickly, but the system had a drawback. The magazine could not be topped off until all 8 rounds were spent. In 1936, after countless tests, refinements, and debates, Garand's rifle, under the official designation U.S. Rifle, caliber .30 M1, was finally adopted by the U.S. Army. America became the first and only country in the world to adopt a semi-automatic rifle as its standard issue infantry weapon. But even then, the problems weren't over. The first production rifles that reached the troops proved to be unreliable. Soldiers complained of constant stoppages during firing. The scandal reached Congress. Garand had to go back to the drawing board and, in 1940, completely redesign the gas system. Only then did the rifle become the reliable and formidable weapon we know today. John Garand's dream had come true. His perseverance and genius had given America a revolutionary weapon. But time was running out. In Europe, war was already raging, and very soon, American soldiers would have to find out for themselves what this rapid-firing rifle was worth in combat against the battle-hardened veterans of the Wehrmacht and the fanatical soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army. December 8, 1941, less than 24 hours after the smoke had cleared over a devastated Pearl Harbor, the Empire of Japan struck again. The invasion of the Philippines, America's outpost in the Pacific, had begun. It was here, in the chaos of retreat, under a hail of bombs, and in the humid jungles of the Bataan Peninsula, that the new M1 Garand rifle would face its first baptism by fire. The Japanese soldiers, veterans of the war in China, were some of the most experienced and ruthless fighters in the world. They were accustomed to a certain rhythm of combat. Their Arisaka rifle was a classic bolt action. After firing a shot, a Japanese infantryman knew he had a few seconds while his opponent, armed with a similar rifle, reloaded. In those seconds, he could dash for cover, change position, or take aim. It was the unwritten rule of the infantry duel. But now, facing American and Filipino units armed with Garands, the Japanese found themselves in a completely new, incomprehensible, and terrifying reality. They would fire a shot, raise their heads to make a run for it, and be met immediately by a hail of return fire. There was no pause. The American GI could send 2, 3, 5 rounds their way as fast as he could pull the trigger. The effect was stunning, primarily on a psychological level. Japanese soldiers, accustomed to total superiority in close combat and their famous banzai charges, suddenly found they couldn't even lift their heads. Any attempt to charge was met with a wall of lead. Their reports, intercepted by American intelligence, were filled with bewilderment and superstitious dread. They reported to their command that the Americans had somehow managed to arm every infantryman with a light machine gun. They couldn't believe a standard rifle was capable of such a volume of fire. The defense of the Philippines ended tragically. Cut off from supplies, American and Filipino forces were forced to surrender. But the reports on the M1 Garand's combat effectiveness sent back to the U.S. before the surrender were glowing. the rifle worked. It gave the American soldier a massive firepower advantage. The M1's first use in Europe was more modest but no less revealing. In August of 42, during the disastrous raid on the French port of Dieppe, a small detachment of 50 American Rangers, armed with Garands, covered the withdrawal of Canadian units. And once again, the enemy was shocked by the density of their fire. News of the wonder weapon spread quickly through the army. Every soldier who had to fight with the old Springfield M1903 rifle dreamed of getting his hands on an M1 Garand. The rifle was becoming a symbol of the new American army, technological, powerful, and modern. It gave the soldiers confidence. John Garand, sitting in his office in Springfield, could be pleased. His creation had not failed, but the real tests were still to come. It was one thing to fight a defensive battle on islands, and quite another to go on the offensive in Europe, through the labyrinths of the French hedgerows and the ruins of German cities. There, the M1 Garand would have to face the best soldiers of the Wehrmacht, armed with equally deadly weapons, and prove its superiority in the most brutal battles in history. In theory, it was a perfect scenario. America was entering the war armed with the most advanced infantry rifle in the world, but reality, as is often the case, turned out to be far more mundane and complicated. Rearming a multi-million-man army is not the same as running tests on a firing range. It is a gigantic, unwieldy logistical machine, and it operated at a painfully slow pace. When Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the Springfield and Winchester factories simply had not had time to produce enough Garands to arm everyone. Peacetime industry was only just shifting to a war footing. As a result, the majority of the U.S. Army and virtually the entire Marine Corps went to war with their father's weapon, the proven, reliable, but outdated Springfield M1903 rifle. It was a classic bolt action, a direct descendant of the German Mauser, and a veteran of the First World War. It was an excellent, accurate, and reliable rifle that was well loved in the Army, but its rate of fire was 4 to 5 times lower than the M1 Garands, and in the jungles of the Pacific, that difference meant life or death. The first to learn this the hard way were the Marines of the 1st Division, who landed on the forsaken island of Guadalcanal in August of 42. In the brutal fighting for Henderson Field, amidst mud and tropical fever, they faced the fanatical resistance of the Japanese. Every night, the Japanese launched desperate banzai charges, and the Marines had to fight them off by feverishly working the bolts of their Springfields. At the same time, U.S. Army units, already armed with Garands, were deployed to the island, and the Marines listened with envy and frustration as the Army positions erupted, not with the sparse crackle of single shots, but with dense, almost machine gun-like fire. The difference was obvious. A dark joke was even born. Why does a Marine need a shovel to fight off the Japanese while he's reloading his damn Springfield? Soldiers were willing to do anything to get their hands on a prized Garand. They traded them for captured samurai swords, cigarettes, and whiskey. The presence of an M1 in a squad immediately increased its chances of survival. The problem wasn't just a shortage of rifles. Even where Garands were available, there was often a lack of the unique 8-round en-bloc clips. During the defense of the Philippines, American soldiers, after firing a clip, were forced to crawl on the ground under fire, searching for ejected clips to manually reload them with cartridges. The logistics system was simply not prepared for the new weapon. Only by the end of 43 did M1 Garand production reach full capacity, and the Army was finally fully rearmed. The Marine Corps, ironically, received the new rifles last and unofficially used Springfields right up until the end of the war. But the old rifle was not retired. Thanks to its exceptional accuracy, the Springfield M1903 became the primary sniper rifle of the U.S. Army, and in that role, it served faithfully all the way to the Vietnam War. This difficult and painful rearmament process was a clear demonstration of how hard it is for a conservative military machine to adapt. But despite all the difficulties, by the time of the decisive battles in Europe and the Pacific, the American soldier had the weapon that gave him a crucial advantage, a weapon that made a very distinct and now legendary sound. Every weapon has its own soul, its own character. For the M1 Garand rifle, this character was defined by two things: the 8 rounds it could unleash on an enemy in a matter of seconds, and the ringing metallic ping it made after the 8th shot. The Garand's feeding system was ingenious in its simplicity and speed. Instead of inserting rounds one by one or using bulky detachable magazines, a soldier would take a preloaded 8-round metal clip and, with a single motion, push it down from the top into the open action. The bolt would automatically snap forward, chambering the first round. The rifle was ready for combat. Reloading took mere seconds, but after the 8th round left the barrel, a small engineering miracle occurred. The bolt locked to the rear, and a special mechanism forcefully ejected the empty clip upward. As it did, the light metal clip produced that legendary, ringing sound, the ping. For the American soldier, this sound was a signal, time to reload. This very sound is the source of the most prominent and persistent myth about the Garand. It was believed that clever German and Japanese soldiers learned to recognize this ping and, upon hearing it, would charge, knowing that the American infantryman was unarmed for a few crucial seconds. This story traveled from one training camp to another, told by veterans to new recruits, and became a part of military folklore. Soldiers even devised tricks, carrying empty clips to throw on the ground to imitate the sound and lure the enemy out of cover. But was there any truth to this tale? Most historians and veterans agree that it is nothing more than a myth. In the roar of actual combat, amidst exploding shells, machine gun bursts, and screams, hearing a faint metallic ping, even from a short distance, was practically impossible. Besides, an American soldier rarely fought alone. While one was reloading, his squad mates continued to provide covering fire, and even if an enemy miraculously heard the sound, they couldn't possibly know which of the dozen or so Americans was out of ammunition. To charge in such a situation would have been pure suicide. Nevertheless, the clip-fed system did have real disadvantages. The main one was that the rifle could not be topped off. If a soldier had used, say, 3 or 4 rounds, he couldn't simply add new ones as one could with a rifle using a detachable magazine. He had to either fire off the remaining rounds for nothing or perform a complex maneuver to eject the partially spent clip. In the heat of battle, this was inconvenient and dangerous, but all these drawbacks were more than outweighed by the M1's greatest advantage, its phenomenal firepower. 8 rapid, accurate shots without needing to take a hand off the weapon to work a bolt. In close quarters combat, in trenches, in the woods, or in city ruins, this capability was priceless, and it was this very capability that allowed American infantry to develop new, aggressive tactics that gave them a decisive advantage on the battlefields of Europe. June 6, 1944, D-Day, hundreds of thousands of American, British, and Canadian soldiers were landing on the coast of Normandy. For most of the American infantrymen storming Omaha and Utah beaches, this was their first real battle, and in their hands was the M1 Garand rifle. It was here in Europe, in the fight against the battle-hardened veterans of the Wehrmacht, that it would fully reveal its potential. After the Americans broke through the coastal defenses at great cost, they entered a true hell on earth. This hell was called the bocage. The Normandy countryside was a labyrinth of small fields, separated by thick, high hedgerows growing on earthen banks. Each of these fields became a natural fortress, an ideal defensive position for the Germans. They set up MG-42 machine guns and mortars in the thickets and hid snipers, turning every American attempt to advance into a bloody slaughter. It was in this labyrinth that the M1 Garand demonstrated its decisive advantage. The fighting in the bocage was at short, almost pistol-like ranges. Visibility was limited, and the enemy could appear from behind the next bush at any second. Under these conditions, the ability to fire several shots quickly without taking the rifle from one's shoulder was invaluable. A German soldier armed with a Mauser 98K was vulnerable for several seconds after his shot. In those same seconds, an American GI could suppress a machine gun nest or pin down a group of infantrymen, giving his comrades the chance to maneuver. The Garand's firepower fit perfectly with American infantry tactics. When a squad came under fire, it didn't just dig in defensively. One part of the squad would begin to lay down intense suppressive fire, literally keeping the Germans' heads down, while another group executed a flanking maneuver to hit the enemy from the side. With bolt-action rifles, such a tactic would have been impossible. With Garands, it became the foundation of American infantry doctrine. Later, when the Allies broke out of Normandy and the fighting moved into the cities of France, Belgium, and Germany itself, the M1's superiority became even more apparent. In the ruins of Aachen or the forests of the Ardennes, where battles were often fought for every house or every tree, rate of fire was everything. German veterans who survived these battles recalled with respect and fear the volume of fire that American infantry could generate. Of course, the M1 Garand was not a perfect weapon. It was heavy, long, and its 8-round clip didn't allow the rifle to be topped off at any moment. But on the battlefields of Europe, its strengths far outweighed its weaknesses. It gave the common American infantryman something his opponent didn't have: confidence in his weapon and the ability to stand on equal footing with even the most experienced enemy soldiers. And this was especially evident in duels with their most dangerous and hated adversaries, German snipers. In the pantheon of soldiers' fears, the German sniper held a special place. He was invisible, ruthless, and devilishly effective. Armed with a superb Mauser 98K rifle with a telescopic sight, he could lie in his ambush for hours, in the attic of a ruined house, in a tree, or in the folds of the terrain, and with a single shot, sow chaos and panic among the advancing Americans. He picked off officers, machine gunners, and radio men, demoralizing entire units. A duel with such an opponent was a deadly business. Traditional counter-sniper tactics were slow and risky. One had to spot the shooter's position by the muzzle flash or the sound of the shot, and then try to suppress him with machine gun fire or call in an artillery strike. A friendly sniper for a counter-sniper duel might simply not be available, but with the arrival of the M1 Garand, the ordinary American infantryman gained a new, unexpected, and highly effective method for hunting snipers. The Americans quickly realized that their main advantage was rate of fire. They developed a simple but effective tactic. As soon as a sniper claimed a victim in a unit, the entire squad would immediately freeze and scan the direction from which the shot was presumed to have come. Everyone watched for the slightest movement, the glint of an optic, anything that might give away the enemy's position. And as soon as the position was even roughly identified, the real magic of the Garand began. One or more soldiers, without wasting time on careful aiming, would unleash a hail of fire on the sniper's suspected cover. 8 rounds went downrange in a matter of seconds. Bullets tore through foliage, ricocheted off walls, and chewed into the wooden beams of an attic. For a German sniper accustomed to a deliberate duel with bolt actions, this was something new and terrifying. He would fire one shot and, instead of the single return shot he was prepared for, a torrent of lead would rain down on him. He had no time to change position or take a second aimed shot. His task became simply to survive under this withering fire. Often, the American soldiers didn't even need to hit the sniper directly. The sheer volume of fire would force him to give himself away, to move, to try to escape, and at that moment, another rifleman's bullet would find him. This tactic became known as marching fire, or walking fire. A soldier, laying down continuous fire from his Garand, would literally comb a suspicious area of terrain, giving the enemy no chance. Of course, the M1 Garand was not a sniper rifle in the classic sense. It lacked the long-range precision of the Springfield M1903 or the German Mauser 98K, but at the typical engagement distances in Europe from 100 to 400 meters, its accuracy was more than sufficient, and its rate of fire turned every American infantryman into a potential sniper killer. John Garand's rifle didn't just give the soldier a new weapon, it gave him a new philosophy of combat, a philosophy where fire superiority and suppression of the enemy became the key to victory and survival. And this philosophy fundamentally changed American infantry tactics on the battlefields of World War II. Military science before the Second World War was built on a simple truth: infantry advances under the cover of artillery. An artillery barrage forces the enemy to hug the ground, and when it ends, the infantry attacks. But the M1 Garand gave the American Army the ability to create its own pocket artillery. This was a revolution in tactics, and it was called suppressive fire. The idea was simple: to make the enemy afraid to raise their head. Thanks to the Garand's rate of fire, a 12-man American infantry squad could generate a volume of fire that, for the Germans, was only achievable by a machine gun crew, while a German infantryman could make 15 aim shots per minute with his Mauser 98K. A trained American GI with an M1 Garand could deliver 40 to 50. This was a threefold superiority in firepower. Based on this superiority, the tactic of fire and movement was born. The squad would split into two groups, a fire team and a maneuver team. The fire team, using cover, would begin to lay down intense fire on the enemy's position. Their task was not necessarily to hit the enemy, but to force them to duck, to prevent them from firing accurately. While the enemy was pinned to the ground by this hail of lead, the maneuver team would make a short dash to a new position, closing with the enemy. Then, the groups would switch roles. The maneuver team would open fire, covering the movement of the fire team. And so, step by step, like two pistons in a single engine, the squad advanced, constantly keeping the enemy under fire. A more aggressive form of this tactic was marching fire, which was especially favored by General George Patton. He ordered his soldiers to advance on enemy positions while firing continuously from the hip or the shoulder. Again, the goal was not so much to hit the enemy, but to create immense psychological pressure. Hearing the whistle of bullets overhead and seeing the enemy advancing without ceasing their fire, many German soldiers lost their nerve, their own fire becoming chaotic and unaimed. This tactic completely broke the German doctrine, which was centered on the machine gun nests as the heart of the defense. The Americans learned not to assault a machine gun head-on, but to bypass it. While one group laid down suppressive fire on the machine gun position, two others would flank it, closing to grenade-throwing distance. German officers, when interrogated after being captured, spoke with bewilderment and admiration about the firepower of American infantry. They couldn't understand how squads without machine gun support could create such a curtain of fire. One captured German training document stated, "The enemy's rifle squads create fire equivalent to our machine gun positions. Standard suppression tactics are ineffective against them." Of course, such tactics required a massive expenditure of ammunition, but America, with its gigantic industrial might, could afford it. Over the course of the war, nearly 5.5 million M1 Garand rifles and billions of rounds of ammunition for them were produced. The M1 Garand wasn't just a weapon, it was the embodiment of the American industrial approach to war, a democratization of firepower, as historians would later call it, every soldier was given a tool that granted him fire superiority, and this principle worked equally well in the fields of Normandy and in the deadly jungles of the Pacific. If the war in Europe was a war of maneuver and technology, the war in the Pacific was a war for survival. It was a war fought in inhuman conditions, in humid, malaria-infested jungles, on volcanic islands with black sand, and in the labyrinths of coral reefs. And the enemy here was different. The Japanese soldier fought with fanatical courage, scorning death, and considering surrender the greatest disgrace. His main tactic at a critical moment in battle was the banzai charge, a desperate human wave attack in which hundreds of soldiers, screaming banzai, would hurl themselves at enemy positions to engage in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Against such an enemy, the M1 Garand's rate of fire proved to be more than just an advantage. It was salvation. American Marines and soldiers armed with Garands could meet a wave of attacking Japanese with a dense wall of fire, mowing down their ranks as they approached, where a soldier with a bolt-action rifle could get off 1 or 2 shots. A soldier with a Garand could fire a full 8-round clip. The stories of Pacific Campaign veterans are full of accounts of how a single company armed with Garands could repel an attack by an entire Japanese battalion. The M1 rifle also proved to be an ideal weapon for jungle combat. In the dense undergrowth, visibility was limited to a few meters. An enemy could appear out of nowhere for a moment and then vanish. A soldier didn't have time for careful aiming. The ability to quickly shoulder the rifle and fire several shots in the enemy's direction often decided the outcome of a short, furious firefight. The powerful .30-06 cartridge, unlike the weaker M1 carbine round, easily penetrated the thick foliage and small trees the enemy tried to use for cover. But here, too, it was not without problems. The humid, hot climate of the jungle was a severe test for the Garand's complex mechanism. The rifle had to be constantly cleaned to avoid corrosion and stoppages. Its weight of over 4 kilograms and its length of over a meter made it unwieldy for movement in the dense thickets. Many soldiers, especially those not on the front lines, artillerists, signalmen, drivers, preferred the lighter and more compact M1 carbine. It was not as powerful, but in close combat, its 15-round magazine offered a serious advantage. Nevertheless, for the line infantry, for those who assaulted the fortified Japanese positions on Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the M1 Garand remained the primary weapon. It gave the American soldier the confidence that he could withstand any enemy onslaught. The Japanese, having faced the Garand's firepower, were so impressed that by the end of the war, they made a desperate attempt to copy it. Their rifle, known as the Type 4 or Type 5, was a near-exact copy of the Garand, but adapted for the Japanese cartridge and a detachable magazine. However, it was too late. Only a few hundred were produced, and they never had any impact on the course of the war. The M1 Garand's superiority in the Pacific theater of operations remained undisputed. In the world of firearms, there has always been a clear dividing line. There were rifles for the infantryman, reliable, mass-produced, and reasonably accurate. And there were rifles for the sniper, exceptionally accurate, often handcrafted, with a bolt action that ensured maximum precision. A semi-automatic rifle, by definition, could not be a sniper rifle. The moving parts of its action, the bolt and operating rod, created vibrations that disrupted the aim and reduced accuracy. But the Second World War changed all the rules. The American military, faced with the effectiveness of German snipers, desperately needed its own mass-produced sniper weapon. The old Springfield M1903 rifle was very accurate, but it was a bolt action. A sniper armed with it had to manually reload after every shot, losing sight of the target. But what if a sniper could be given the ability to make a quick second or even a third shot? The idea of turning the M1 Garand into a sniper rifle seemed paradoxical. How could a weapon designed for suppressive fire become a tool for a surgically precise shot? But the engineers at the Springfield Armory accepted the challenge. The main problem was how to mount a scope. The Garand was loaded from the top, and the empty clip was also ejected upward after the 8th shot. Mounting a scope centrally, as on bolt-action rifles, was impossible. It would simply be struck by the ejecting clip. The solution they found was simple and elegant. The scope mount was installed on the side, on the left wall of the receiver. The optic was offset to the left of the barrel's axis, which was not ideal but allowed the rifle to be loaded freely. Thus, the two main sniper variants were born, the M1C and the M1D. The M1C model, adopted in 1944, had a more complex mount that required drilling the receiver. The M1D model, which appeared slightly later, was equipped with a mount that attached directly to the barrel, allowing any standard issue rifle to be converted into a sniper rifle right in the field. Both rifles were equipped with low magnification scopes, the M81 or M82, and were often fitted with a cheek pad on the stock for easier aiming and a conical flash hider. Of course, the Sniper Garand could not match the absolute accuracy of classic sniper rifles, but it gave the sniper something he never had before, the ability to make a quick follow-up shot. If the first bullet missed, the sniper had a chance to correct his mistake in a fraction of a second before the target could disappear. Moreover, a sniper armed with an M1C or M1D, if discovered, could unleash a hail of 8 rounds on the enemy, protecting himself and his position. Due to production complexity and their late introduction, the Sniper Garands did not see widespread use in World War II. Only a few tens of thousands were produced. The primary U.S. sniper rifle until the end of the war remained the good old Springfield M1903, but the Sniper Garand's true moment to shine came later, in Korea and in the early stages of the Vietnam War, where it served American snipers faithfully, proving that rate of fire and precision could coexist in one weapon. General George S. Patton had a reputation for being blunt, outspoken, and completely unsentimental. He was a champion of the tank, a god of armored spearheads and lightning-fast breakthroughs. His world consisted of roaring engines, clanking tracks, and the thunder of cannons. This makes the words he wrote in an official letter to the Chief of Ordnance of the U.S. Army in January 1945 all the more surprising and significant. Analyzing the combat experience in Europe, General Patton delivered his verdict on the M1 Garand rifle. In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised. This phrase, from one of the most celebrated and demanding commanders in history, became the highest honor for John Garand's rifle, a knighthood of sorts. But why would a general who was in love with tanks place such high value on a common infantry rifle? Because Patton, more than anyone, understood a simple truth. Tanks can break through defenses, planes can sow chaos in the rear, and artillery can wipe entire cities off the face of the earth. But it is the common infantryman, G.I. Joe, walking on the ground, who wins the war and holds the territory. And the M1 Garand was that infantryman's primary tool. Patton saw how the Garand's firepower allowed his infantry to keep pace with the rapid advance of his armored columns. He saw how the fire and movement tactic, impossible without a rapid-firing rifle, allowed his soldiers to effectively suppress pockets of resistance that could have slowed down the entire army. He understood that a soldier's confidence in his weapon is half the battle. An American infantryman armed with a Garand was confident that he had a firepower advantage over his enemy. The M1 Garand rifle became the perfect embodiment of the American approach to war. It wasn't just a rifle, but an entire system based on industrial might and tactical superiority. While other countries placed their bets on specialized weapons, submachine guns for close combat, bolt actions for long range. The M1 Garand was a universal soldier. It was accurate enough for medium-range shooting and had a high enough rate of fire for close-quarters combat. It gave a squad leader a flexibility that his German counterpart could only dream of. And it wasn't just generals who shared this assessment. Millions of American soldiers who went through the hell of the Second World War remembered their trusty rifle with love and respect. They cursed its weight, complained about the awkward clip, and feared M1 thumb, a painful injury one could get from improper reloading. But in combat, they trusted it with their lives, because it worked in the mud of Normandy, in the snows of the Ardennes, and in the tropical downpours of the Philippines. The M1 Garand fired and saved lives. Patton's assessment was not just a compliment, it was a recognition that in modern warfare, victory belongs not only to the side with more tanks, but also to the one that could give its soldier the most effective personal weapon. And in that respect, America was ahead of the world. World War II was over. Millions of soldiers returned home, and it seemed the weapon of victory was destined for warehouses to become a museum exhibit. But for the M1 Garand, the story was just beginning. Just 5 years later, in 1950, American soldiers went into battle once again, this time on the snow-covered hills and in the frozen ravines of Korea. And once again, they held the trusty M1 Garand rifle. In the brutal battles against North Korean and Chinese troops, the Garand again proved its reliability and firepower. In this war, it faced its main ideological adversary, the Soviet SKS carbine, another semi-automatic rifle. But the Garand's powerful cartridge and proven design continued to give American infantrymen an advantage. The M1 Garand remained the primary rifle of the U.S. Army until the late 1950s, when it was replaced by the M14 rifle. But the M14 was not a revolution. In essence, it was the same Garand, just deeply modernized with a 20-round detachable magazine and the capability for automatic fire. The mechanism conceived by John Garand proved so successful that it lived on in the new weapon. But the Garand's legacy was far broader. Its reliable gas-operated system with a rotating bolt became a source of inspiration for designers around the world. Even Mikhail Kalashnikov, when creating his legendary AK-47, studied and, according to many experts, borrowed some solutions from the Garand, specifically the rotating bolt locking mechanism and the general layout of the bolt carrier and gas piston. Thus, the rifle that became a symbol of the American Army indirectly influenced the creation of its main adversary in future conflicts. Today, the M1 Garand is no longer in service. Its place has been taken by more modern assault rifles, but it has not been retired to a quiet life. It can still be seen in the hands of honor guards and drill teams around the world, where its crisp, sharp drill movements are a distinct art form. It is a coveted item for collectors and sport shooters who value it for its history, reliability, and the unparalleled experience of firing it. The M1 Garand was more than just a piece of steel and wood. It was a revolution. It proved to skeptical generals that a standard-issue semi-automatic rifle was not a waste of ammunition, but the key to tactical superiority. It changed the rhythm of infantry combat, transforming it from a series of single duels into a symphony of suppressive fire. And most importantly, it became an inseparable part of the image of the American soldier of World War II, tenacious, pragmatic, well-armed, and confident in his weapon. General Patton's words, calling it the greatest battle implement ever devised, proved to be prophetic. This was the rifle that helped win the war and forever changed the way wars are fought. Thank you for watching to the end. If you liked it, please give it a like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss new videos. There are more amazing stories to come. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.